It's helping to build at least a temporary floor under income so that people can just cope with the ordinary costs of living. It's a lot of things which get a little rhetoric, but have gotten rather pitiful action so far.
William Greider, you've written that the scandal is not that the government is acting, but that the government is not acting forcefully enough. What do you think the government needs to do right now?
I think the government needs right now, I don't think they're going to go that way just yet, but I think ultimately they may have to step up, exercise its full powers in emergency, and literally take control of the banking system and the financial system and supervise it as it deals with the realities of firms that will not survive and those that can survive. Husband the solvent banks and make sure they stay solvent instead of tipping over, and then use that power to guide economic policy for the country. That is, make sure those financial institutions are lending and keeping the credit spigots open for businesses, for families, for all of the uses that go on in our society, and then add the stimulus alongside it, and I mean major stimulus, to encourage all of those players. Here's what happens when in a situation like this, at least historically, and I think it's beginning to happen now. Everybody quite reasonably hunkers down. That's a rational decision. I know we're in trouble. I know the system is crumbling. I'm going to put my money under the mattress, so to speak, and wait this out. So that means people stop spending and they stop borrowing and can't borrow. And bankers, likewise, stop lending. The government is the only player with the power to step in and reverse that dynamic. That is what the federal government should be doing forcefully right now. In the banking system, it has most of the power it needs to exercise control. And I'm not talking about, well, it sounds like nationalizing the banking system, and in a sense it is. It says, okay, we're in charge for the duration until we're out of this crisis. But you don't need to take over the buildings and so forth. The banking regulators, including the Federal Reserve and a number of others, if they had the will, if they had the understanding, if they had the authority of the political situation, can literally impose supervisory control over a troubled bank. And banks really don't, I mean, you can go to court and sue if you like, but basically in the meantime, they get to tell the bankers how to behave. That's what I want to see right now. And that will give the regulators the opportunity to go through banks one by one, starting with the largest ones, and say, these people are in much worse shape than they've revealed. Let's put them in either a workout plan that forces them to shed some of their liabilities, but also to start behaving properly, or close them down, force them to sell. Now, we're seeing that process already. What I'd like to see is a sort of general approach that does that, even as the government identifies big spending projects that will be part of that stimulus package. It's all very fine to give people a small rebate, but that doesn't begin to get there, because as we've seen, most people will say, great, I get to pay my phone bill this month, or I get to catch up a little bit on the mortgage. What you need to do is direct government contracts, spending, loans, all kinds of vehicles to create, stimulate economic activity, which then has a sort of lateral effect in communities and so forth and so on. Those two prongs.
William Greider, we're going to go to break. We're going to come back, though. National Affairs correspondent for The Nation, forthcoming book called Come Home, America. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.
Once I built a railroad, made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once I built a tower to the sun, brick and rivet and lime. Once I built a tower, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once in khaki suits, gee, we look swell, full of that Yankee Doodle Dum. 500,000 boots went slogging through hell, and I was a kid with a drum.
Alison Moore singing Yef Harburg's song, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We're broadcasting on over 700 stations, on Pacifica and NPR, and low-power FM and college and community stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations, and both TV satellite networks, Dish Network Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and on DirecTV Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines also available in Spanish for any radio station to take. As we continue with our discussion with William Greider, written a number of books, as one coming out soon, Come Home, America, the rise and fall and redeeming promise of our country. William Greider, how did we get here? How did we get to this point? Who was predicting it?
Well, there were a lot of bag ladies on street corners, myself included, who were telling people for 2 decades, really, that the political system was in the process, under intense guidance from financiers, of unwinding, literally obliterating, all of the hard lessons that Americans learned in the pain and sorrow of the Great Depression. I'm talking about the New Deal rules and laws that imposed prudential controls on the behavior of the financial system. And a whole new generation came along that said, that's old-fashioned, we don't need that anymore, we've got computers, we can do these things. And those old bankers in the 1920s who produced the collapse of 1929 were good people, but they didn't understand what we understand. And so we got a, quote, new architecture for the financial system. And people have been reading for the last couple of years the gimmicks, the delusions, the fraudulent valuations that are built into that system now, still there.
You have written about the savings and loan scandal and about what was created then, the RTC, the Resolution Trust Corporation. Right. Explain that and its relation to today.
Well, the model that Paulson, the Secretary of Treasury, is taking is the Resolution Trust Corporation, which they created in the late 80s to clean up the mess the government had also caused by collusion with the banking system in the collapse of savings and loans. Bank regulators closed down a lot of S&Ls that failed and therefore inherited their assets, which in most cases were property, houses, shopping centers, developments, and so forth and so on. How to get, and basically the taxpayers picked up the tab. How to dispose of those assets. They created the RTC, which literally sold them pennies on the dollar back to the financial system, which had lent the money in the first place to start these projects. And so it was not just a financial bath, but it seemed to me a scandal in its own terms. The same players who had helped gin up the reckless borrowing and lending in the savings and loan industry pick up the ruined assets and profit again on the downside. What Paulson is doing is The bankers got stuck with all these rotten assets, which they created and sold to each other and to the world. Now let's take those off their hands, and they'll be okay again. I'm not alone in saying that that's a real crapshoot as to whether that works, first of all, because those banks, as I said, are going to get smaller and they're collapsed, and they may or may not start lending again. I would guess not until they see a vibrant economy again. But it's also, and this is where the public stepped up, it's profoundly illegitimate as an act of democracy to take the money from taxpayers and say to the villains in this story, here, can we help you out of your troubles?